Hello and welcome to the Sprocket Pod. Thank you for joining us for a really special episode. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Cameron Collins. I am a revenue operations strategist with RevPartners. I serve as the community manager at Sprocketeer. Got my amazing co-host Mark Lerner here. Mark, go ahead and tell everyone about yourself.
Yes, I'm Mark Lerner. I'm Director of Growth Marketing at DealHub. We are an agile configure price quote solution natively integrated with all the major CRMs, including HubSpot.
And we have our guest today, Paul. Paul Good. Paul, go ahead and introduce yourself to all of our listeners.
Awesome. Thank you, Cameron. I work at RevPartners as well with Cameron. I have the pleasure of working with him. What I work on is our playbooks team, where we make processes and standards and frameworks that help our strategists do it more efficiently. And I'm the subject matter expert on the marketing and content hub side there.
Today, we've got a really exciting episode because I know you live in the world of data modeling, data mapping, helping to build on processes. And in fact, it was our last episode where we did a session on revenue mapping. We went through what we call the bow tie model, which is created by Winning by Design. And we showcased an example of how to map a business against that Winning by Design bow tie model. What I'm really excited for today with having you on, Paul, is taking the notion of mapping a business and you took what we've done and really made it your own. So today we've got a few key themes. We're going to be talking about actually taking that bow tie model and adapting it to make it your own. Really excited to see exactly what that's going to look like and how you've done it. We're also going to be covering product to market fit. How does a business understand if they've found and met product market fit, which is really something that doesn't get enough, I feel, time and attention. I know it's something that you're really passionate about too. And then we'll be talking about go to market motions and data models. The actual concept of taking your business, taking your organization, and understanding what are my go to market motions, which if you haven't seen RevOps Summer School on YouTube, I highly recommend it because it does a deep dive into this topic as well. And then we're going to round out the conversation today talking a little bit about growth models. Again, pre revenue businesses all the way going up through scale, really big part of the conversation. But Paul, thank you very much for joining us today and let's dive in.
Absolutely. Thank you, Cameron. Great recap there. Before we dive into this Miro board, which is real thick, I have fun with Miro, and I also have a slight obsession with dark mode. So I've made Miro dark mode. I want to talk about that first one of adopting the bow tie model. So I pulled up one from Winning by Design of what this is. And so as we talked about last week, this is a really powerful framework to think of not only the funnel that people are used to from a marketing and sales perspective, but then how do you increase total value? And I think it's really a good way to think of it. What I found is it's like a little overly complicated, especially for small business owners. I'm one of those people. I run my own startup, and we'll get a little bit more into that. But I really wanted to say, how do we take this and simplify it and do it on the revenue mapping? And before we get into that, I wanted to give a little overview of who I am to give a little bit more context on it, because I've been within the startup world for about 10 years. And I was going to have a nice little deck here that I was going to go through with y'all. So I made this actually for we have a prop thing at RevPartners where we do call it an Eat and Educate. And I did one on time blocking. And so I thought this might just be a little helpful one to set some context about a little bit about who I am. Is I like to think of my life or my mind as there's a framework in psychology called internal family systems. And I've adopted it similarly, but I really love this movie Inside Out. But I also love customer personas from RevOps. So I was like, how do I blend these two? And then there's also a show called Big Mouth where they play in a lot of all these different frameworks of how we think of our mind. So what I've done is, how do you combine the two? So I think of my personality as three different personas. I have my productive Paul, aka where I put on my glasses. I normally have a hoodie on and I get deep into the sauce of some computer stuff. But at the same time, I love to dance, and just being giggly and having a fun time with my friends is my playful side. And then I'm also very flamboyant and extra and don't mind talking to a group of people. And so that's my princess side. So I've found this to be a very powerful framework to think of my mind in that. And so within that, I have a mission that I live my life by, is igniting the creative spark in each other. I think process, passion, and people are the kind of secret sauce to igniting that creative spark. And then I have a playful vision statement, which is playful people prancing around as they precisely pursue their peculiar purposes, surrounded by passionate compadres. It's a big tongue twister because I love alliteration. I'm committed to the bit here, but I thought I just might add some context of how to take similar concepts and then apply them to yourself. You can take customer personas that are used for marketing and apply them to how your mind works, is at least how I go about it. I'm not going to go into this full presentation. I just want to set that model there. But the first thing we're going to dive into is how we've adopted the bow tie model towards making it more simplified for small businesses. And then I'll work more through the Miro map. But I wasn't sure if that prompted any questions from you two.
Oh, I have a question. First of all,
Yeah.
I love that. I love the idea of mapping out your own personas.
I'm glad you think so.
Yeah. Do you have trouble switching from one to the other?
Absolutely, man. They're best friends and also, I wouldn't say arch enemies, but they have conflicting desires at times. And I'm in therapy right now, and this has been a constant thing of how do we balance all these different wants. So yes, switching from being very productive into play is really hard. I'm like in work mindset to then how do I flip the switch to have a good time with my friends is hard. And the opposite is true.
Which do you think is harder, going from productive to playful or from playful to productive?
Oh, playful to productive. Absolutely.
Interesting.
I just want to have a good time. But then I'm like, man, do I really want to switch on the hat of focusing? Yeah, no, I definitely find that a little bit harder.
Awesome. Yeah,
Well, I think
I'm coming back from vacation, so I'm like in the same mode.
Awesome.
I
Cameron, you
think
say something?
this yeah, I think this raises a really interesting point, which is as we're going to be talking about the bow tie model and product market fit and a lot of very technical things today, it brings up a really interesting point, which is oftentimes as marketers and for myself someone who works with marketers, we find ourselves creating personas for people. Who's our ICP? And we try to come up with that ideal situation of who's our target client. And I think it's important to remember that people have multiple personas, and maybe it's not quite as black and white as our ICP is this type of person. Yes, there are some amounts of data that we can gather, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts on maybe ICPs and personas should be more of a broad spectrum, since we know that people are not just, okay, they make X, they fit Y gender and Z criteria.
So you hit on a really fascinating point of how different we are as individuals, and that is definitely the goal of my own personal personas. But from a marketing operationalized standpoint, I think there's a tendency to over categorize. So there's power in simplification and acknowledging personas aren't people. They are these fictitious characters that we can use to simplify things. But at the end of the day, everyone's their own unique creature. And so that would be my thought process. Yes, it could be helpful to as a thought experiment, but like when you're talking about putting your customer personas into HubSpot and tagging context to it, I think there's a lot of power of just simplification to actually operationalize it.
Ultimately, I think that this is a really big takeaway for a lot of people where you look at the state of LinkedIn nowadays, and I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that it's become a much more, shall we say, flamboyant place than it was 12, 24, or 36 months ago. And I think that's just because a lot of people are realizing that when it comes to marketing and when it comes to content, people are not seeing an ad that just has a value prop and clicking on it. You have to be creative, you have to stand out. And a lot of the ways you can do that is by appealing to the actual different real personas that people have. So it's not
Absolutely.
just this person is a CTO at this size company. Let's create an ad that says here's why it's valuable. But that person might enjoy funny stuff. And so you create content that is appealing to them and draw them in that way.
Absolutely, man. I think the more we can humanize the world, I think is where, yeah, from a business standpoint, it works out is people buy from people and authenticity. But I think it also just creates a more empathetic, compassionate world, a world I would want to live in. So I
Yeah.
think the more we can lean into that side of ourselves, it'll be beneficial from a business standpoint, but also just creating our more harmonious ecosystem.
But it's tough. It's a very fine line between being authentic and being cringe. And if you're faking the funk, it's very obvious. And I found that over time, marketers ruin everything. Me being a marketer, and I worry about that happening. There's definitely a lot of cringe out there as
Uh,
well.
Especially you being authentic on the internet to yourself is very cringe. And I'll
Right.
actually use that as a fun little segue of my main passion project I work on is a dance fitness format. I call it primal prancing, which is very cringe to me, but it's me being my authentic self, which is I love to dance. I love to shake my ass on the internet, but I also love to nerd out and do rev ops. So that's actually brings it to my segue into my Miro map is I have my very thick one I made for my business, but I don't want to talk about that. I'm talking about me trying to blend these two concepts of I love RevOps and nerding and processes, but I also love to dance. So I've taken what I built here and turned it into how to think of this framework under a content creator lens. Like you two all are posting content on the internet. You can think of your entity as that. If you want to. I mean, this is how I think of it. There's so many different ways to think of anything, but this is how I think through the business world. So I was going to dive into this, but it might actually play into a question I had for both of y'all, but it is why are we doing this? As I said, mine is igniting the creative spark in each other. Within my primal prancing one, it's about unlocking the latent desire to move and dance. And so my vision statement is this. So my question to y'all would be, do you have a reason why you put through the time and effort to post internet like content on the internet? This takes time and effort to do. So do you have a why that really guides your decisions?
Good
I could take
question.
the plunge on that
Yeah.
because I know for me it's really twofold. One is probably the obvious answer that a lot of people would give, which is you build your brand. And it's less about I want to be an influencer and more about I do want to be an authority figure. But really, beyond that, for me, in a very personal sense, it's giving to others education in a way that I have received it myself. So, a lot of what I've learned about business and business development and sales over the years, I went out and I was hunting content. And oftentimes it was free content going on YouTube and looking for webinars and looking for influencers or people on social media. And so I'd realized pretty quickly how much I could learn for free just by seeking out knowledge and wanted to absorb all that knowledge myself and then find ways to give back to others by creating content and helping to educate and make it more creative over time as well. Mark,
I love
curious
that.
to hear your take.
Yeah, I wish I could say that my mission is to make the world a better place. I think if part of it is like Cameron said, establishing thought leadership in our space. But I think at least in the world I'm currently inhabiting, it's a lot about representing my company as representing a certain persona of the company. The company itself is this face. In general, any company is a faceless thing. It's hard to have a personality, but there are different folks within the company that represent different aspects of the company's personality, and so I have to embody one of those, or I do embody one of those. I think on the other, it is to convey some of the things I've learned over the years and to increase my network because I don't know who said it, but like, essentially, the larger surface area you create, the greater likelihood of having luck or things like that. The more you put yourself out, the better, more likely good things are to come your way.
And
And
it
seeing
brings
that
other like-minded people around you too. You share
for sure.
yourself, and then people resonate with that person that you shared. And that aligns with mine is I'm a soul, particularly around this prancing programmer identity of like, why am I doing all this? Is one, I build cool things and I want to share them. At least I think they're cool, and I want to share them with people because I'm basically like a nerd who wants to just do show and tell. Think of a little kid who's, I just built this thing, man. I want to share it. I definitely have that. And the other one is it plays into my market of who I'm trying to attract is the founder Fred. I like my alliterations is I've been a sole founder every time I've done this because I am too particular and I like to do things in a certain way. And I know how lonely it is to be a sole founder. So my hope is to connect with other sole founders and just be like, hey man, I've nerded out on this. Maybe it's helpful to you. Do you have feedback and learn on it and really just connect with other like-minded soul founders? because it can feel very lonely and scary. I went through a business accelerator during my time, and I have actually a couple different people I've within my network, within the founder world, committed suicide. I'm not going to name names for obvious reasons, but it's a very lonely, scary world with a lot of pressures. So I care about those people, and that's why I'm doing this.
For sure. And I think having a mission is super important, especially in this day and age where, to Mark's point, businesses are oftentimes these faceless entities and they have a mission and a logo, and there's so much that goes into it. The reality is, especially as it pertains to what we're talking about today, you have to know where you're headed. And really, the best way to do that is by sitting down and understanding, where am I today and where do I want to go? And so I really want to dig into how you've taken the bow tie model that we talked about previously, and the one that Winning by Design created. But how have you adopted that process of looking at a business and then reconfiguring it to meet the needs for what you're building?
Absolutely. Thank you for the transition. We definitely dived into the why. Thank you guys for entertaining that. I always like to start with the why, but to bring it back, this is the bow tie model, right? Where you have strangers on the left-hand side, full lifelong customers on the right-hand side. So we're going to do a preview of this as I have my own like rev mapping template. We went over that, but I found it and I broke it down based off of go-to-market motions on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side being that max impact, but I made it a lot more simple to make it more friendly to that founder Fred. And so in terms of how to apply just like this framework to business in general, is this I've really liked the product market fit concept. And I think you can always relate back what you're doing in the business opportunity to product market fit. You can relate so many aspects back to it. I'm going to go into that. And so I'm going to relate it to the main entity that we're talking about here, which is my content creator personality. I call it prancing programmer. I like to dance, but I also like to build systems and automations and software to that. So I start with market, because at the end of the day, you have to serve a need for a specific person. So who are those people? So I think of them in two different buckets. We have potential students for my dance fitness format who might also find this content interesting. They're a 9-to-5 worker. They like going to movement classes. They're trying to optimize and figure out their routines. And I'm very into that world. So I call them Genuine Gabby. And then founders, founder Fred, he's a sole founder, wearing a bunch of hats, feeling lonely, wants to just have other systems and frameworks and to build community within that. So what are the problems so then you go to market. And so within product, or if you go from market down to product. So within product, there's two buckets. One, when you build product, you have to start with the problem that your product is the solution to. So the problem these people are experiencing are the student doesn't know how to maintain a healthy lifestyle, from they're not having consistent movement to they're having a hard time staying sober because they like to go out and do social events, and they're having a hard time of managing all these different pushes and pulls, and they're looking for help on that front. Founders is that I'm confused on how to implement this new thing they called RevOps, looking for community within the founder network, and just there's so much to learn. How do I know what to focus on? So my hope is with the product of being a content creator, aka the content that I am creating, that would be the product in this circumstance. Yeah, content creators are very interesting go-to-market motion because their product is actually their content. So they're like content and product led, which is a very interesting place to be. And we'll get into that. So for Gabby, it's really this content around how to create a sustainable lifestyle and routines around a healthy and sustainable system, aka like how do I manage all of this, and I have content will be built around that. Founders is I very much a system and framework person. I love to build all these templates and I want to share them with other founders who are going through this. But I like this, how to approach life living a life fueled by RevOps efficiency. I love RevOps for this efficiency drum that we're always beating. And so fit, I think, is the real secret sauce that I think a lot of people forget about. They're like, yeah, I understand who I'm talking about. Yeah, I got a product. But where RevOps actually starts to shine here and where RevOps has an impact is on fit, which is measuring the success of that. Are you actually solving a problem for these people? I haven't even really made a product and I have this guess of what the problem is. I have a tendency to do that. Whoops. But the way I check the fit is, since it's a content creator, the way you check fit here is content engagement. Versus if you're like a SaaS product, the way you check fit would be daily active users to returning customers, from free to paid customers. There's a lot of different metrics you can use to validate, do you actually solve a real problem? So that's how I adopted product market fit in a very simpleized way. You guys have any questions based off like that framework?
I definitely want to add to something that you said, which I think is brilliant, where you said, I guess the product market fit, I just do it. And I think a lot of businesses will benefit from that mindset. Uh, we have a saying here at Rev Partners, 80% of something is better than 100% of nothing. And of course, there's a point where large businesses can't just do things indiscriminately. But moving forward is important. And so, whether you're pre revenue trying to figure out what your business is going to look like, or you are a larger business, I think having that move forward mindset is really important. And it's just something that you mentioned, which I think is a great call out.
Appreciate that. And this consistent testing mindset. We're moving forward, but we're testing if that's actually a good movement forward. Because it's easy to turn a blind eye and be like, yeah, we're moving forward, but we didn't actually validate what we just did.
Yeah. It's an interesting because product market fit, at least in like the software space, is often presented as this kind of like mythical and like this utopia you enter, and it's very obvious when it happens, and then you just skip off into the sunset. And obviously, that's not really the case. But it is very hard to measure it, right? Like I only now see the difference being at a company that very clearly has product market fit, where I've been at very small startups that hadn't gotten there yet. But a lot of it, it's hard to quantify. It's just a vibe where it's just very obvious to me, but I couldn't tell you why it is, besides the fact that growing and all these things. Engagement is a pretty simple one to quantify, but when you work with other folks or you talk to other folks, do you have a way for them to know if they've reached that stage?
I think you definitely, this is, and we're getting into very strong opinions here from a analytical perspective. Yeah, there's these metrics to define if you're moving in the right direction. But I'm hearing the question as, is there this binary of you've reached product market fit?
Yeah.
And I guess I view it in a more cyclical fashion of, you are always having to adjust product market fit. You never fully have it because the market's always changing. So you can say, yeah, we're working towards it and it's looking good. And let's say we're at 8 out of 10 right now. If you don't do anything about it and you stay stagnant, your 8 out of 10 is going to go to a 6 out of 10 real fast.
Yeah.
So that would be my answer is, sure, you can have this spectrum, but there is a continuous improvement process that has to happen.
I think it's probably easier to know if a company absolutely doesn't have product market fit. And the way you'd identify that is goals are not being hit, metrics are being missed, revenue isn't being achieved. There was recently an article about Humane with their AI pin and how, as probably many people know, the business is not doing well. And that's probably a good example of where maybe there wasn't product market fit. And this gets into the notion of go to market motions, which we'll be talking about in a few moments here. But when it comes to product market fit, really the question has to be asked, is my business growing or is it shrinking? Am I saying we're going to sell 100,000 units and we sold 20,000? Maybe the fit isn't there. And if you do sell 100,000 units, does that mean that you have product market fit? Maybe not, but it definitely means you're on the way there. And that's where now you can start asking yourself, are our go to market motions successful? Should we be making changes? And taking it back to the conversation today, Paul, and to what you've mapped out, really, if you're not asking yourself the question and if you're not mapping it similar to what you're doing here, then you're just behind the eight ball. So I'm curious to see what it looks like on here. I know you have the flywheel coming up, but show
Yeah.
us
Well,
how you start to assess all of this.
remember, like I think product market fit works within it. So then how do you structure a team around product market fit? And so think of your product team in this what is it called? The lean methodology. One of the few books I've read, which was around build, measure, learn, which is essentially what your product team does. But where RevOps can really shine is connecting these two around the measure stage. So HubSpot Flywheel, I've always loved this. The moment they dropped it, I was like, this is so cool, and just like paints this picture really well. And so we were talking about specific metrics. So the marketing side gets this content engagement KPIs. They can do market research, focus groups, and get data from there. But also on your sales side, you can think of your sales team as, I don't know, like product feedback savants in a way. Like they're the ones talking to these people, and you get conversion rates. If you're noticing after you do your product demo, your conversion rate drops, maybe you have a product market fit problem because, they actually see the product and what it looks like. They don't want to talk. Versus if your conversion rate from the moment you do product demo to close is really high, I think that's a good inkling of more of a product market fit. And then you have service, which is amazing at getting product market fit, getting suggestions on what to do. If people like NPS, if your revenue is going up, if you have higher usage on it. So I think the concept I'm really trying to paint here is it's always a back to product market fit, even if you put it into these standard teams that we all have, that you have a product that you're building, but this go-to-market team is helping you refine this product. But then you have teams that I call the fit teams that help bridge that gap. So that's where RevOps would live. How do you make these teams talk more efficiently? And that's where we build like the bow tie model and have those conversion rates where we set this up. And then we have reports ready to go where we're not relying on ad hoc feedback from a sales rep. We build it into, when you move it from stage 3 to stage 4, you have a product feedback property right there. And so that's where RevOps really shines in terms of this mindset. And then you got all the other fun teams that you could have in there. But that's how I took that same concept with the flywheel and combined them into this thought process of the product market team dictating your product market fit, dictating what your team structure looks like.
I know you have a lot of strong opinions on product market fit, and we've talked about go to market motions quite a bit on this show. I really want to hear how you tie the two in together. How does a company take, if they think they have product market fit, and use that to build their go to market motions, their data models? What does that even look like?
So we have the models section. A lot of this is actually taken from our RevOps summer school. RP did this summer school class, and we have a lot of these different models that we talk about here. I have some different names for them. And so I'll get to how does product market fit buy into this? Is product market fit will help give you data on which go-to-market motion. You can essentially be doing go-to-market fit testing too, and using that same methodology and testing metrics around it. But I wanted to start here with the first one I start with is purpose model versus, are you doing it for the passion or are you doing it for the profit? AKA nonprofit versus for-profit venture. When you think of the difference between a for-profit and nonprofit, there's really not that much that happens that's different. And if you're like a B Corp, you'd be doing both of these. So then money model is generally what we talk about. Data model is how do you make money? You can have reoccurring revenue, you can have non-reoccurring revenue, and usage is interesting. Think of this as if you're Twilio and you're getting paid per text sent out, or your SendGrid, you're getting paid per email sent out, how many events that you have happen on the platform. So for this, I don't have a money model for my entity. So all the greens and reds, just a reminder, is how I like my current status with this entity. So this template could work for any entity, aka business here. So then money model, I don't have any money model for it. So we get into growth model, and I'll dive a little bit more into that, but we were talking about go-to-market motions. All right. I love a spectrum. We're talking about spectrums here. So on the left-hand side, we have 2 spectrums. So I got these 6 go-to-market motions from, so this is RevOps's, RevPartners framework for it. We break it down based off of average deal size, and then that dictates marketing, sales, and customer success go-to-market motions. I don't have it linked here. I'm not going to struggle through finding it. Is our go-to-market Monday has go-to-market motion, or Mondays, forgot the exact name. We can link it. Is they have 6 different ones, and I really bought into that. And I put them on this spectrum of product focused to people focused. So let's start on the left-hand side, because at the end of the day, if you don't have a product, it's hard to sell anything. So product-led growth, I think a prime example of product-led growth is OpenAI. They created this really cool product that was so cool that it got virality purely just from being this thing, and it could work purely with like you didn't need other people on the platform for it to work. But it was I think the fastest product ever to 100 million users. I think it might have been like 24 hours to 100 million users, which is just wild to think about. And from there, they leveraged product-led growth to partner-led growth, because every app, from my understanding, that's using AI, not all of them, but a majority of them that are using AI are just white labeling OpenAI and ChatGPT. And that is from having a really cool product, they were able to create a partner-led growth, because you can have a partner without your sales team. But at the other end of the spectrum, you have sales-led growth, which you could even put in why I have this here in yellow, is because when you're a founder, this falls into you and your personal network. So me knowing Cameron was the reason I'm on this podcast. I wasn't just some random person who filled out a form. I did this from having a network and a specific connection with a human being. So that's on the sales-led growth of within your team, you each have your own unique communities. I want to stop for questions because I could keep rambling about this for 10 more minutes, but I just want to stop and see if there's any questions.
Yeah. So you talked about it being a spectrum. So in your estimation, is it better to have a singular go-to-market motion that you are focused on, or is it a healthy mix of all of them when you decide to implement one over the other?
I think that's a great question. And I don't know, I have an opinion. I don't think it's the right way, because what I'm really good at is doing stuff like this versus actually really growing businesses. I'm trying to get better at it. But my belief is you have to actually be doing both of these simultaneously in some way for true growth. At the end of the day, your product has to lead by some example. You have to getting some type of word of mouth, some type of traction from just the product. But at the end of the day, to get it off the ground, I found that the founder has to be involved in building a network and introducing it, because I think the days of you build a landing page and throw ads on like Facebook to get people to enter your landing page to then join the waiting list to do it can work. But I think for true good feedback, it has to be built with a human connection. So to answer your question, I think you have to leverage both of these to start, and it actually plays into something else that I'll talk about momentarily. Did that answer your question? Awesome. So yeah, let's just go through the spectrum here, right? So this is more people focused. So let's say you want to build out your sales led motion more. You have event led. Events in my mind is very people focused. You go to these events and you interact with new human beings, and you're building the people from your organization's networks with there. But what's different about it is you can do sales led without events. You can do a pure outbound motion from LinkedIn and not actually attend events. But I find events and in-person human interaction, and I guess you could do this digitally with webinars as well, to be really powerful. As we go more and more digital, the more we can have, the more we go digital, the more impactful the human in-person interactions are. Content and community are very hybrid, and I struggle with the blend between those and which one's on which side of it. But I've led with content at the end of the day is a little bit more people focused, because they're people creating content at the end of the day. This could also be thinking about inbound. HubSpot really dialed in this one, is they just create a lot of content. So people are searching for it. Content finds people on the internet. But community is when you have such a cool product that requires other people to do it. I think I'm a big bubble.io user. They are very community led, where they have this really cool product that can work by itself, but there's so much nuance with that product. You need a community to fill in all the gaps. There's no way Bubble can put out enough content to source it, but they have a really powerful forum where if you ask a question, you have a lot of people answering it. So that is my kind of takeaway of this spectrum and the 6 different go-to-market motions. And just to bring it back to your original question, is I keep clicking on the wrong things, is they're so intertwined. When you have a good product led motion that really helps build your community, if you have a really good product led motion, you have a clear content strategy here. If you have sales led, it makes your content more engaging. you have to have a good product to have a partner, and I can keep creating all the independencies, but they're all very intertwined, but they are still separate. So the reality is, as you focus on a couple, and then it naturally percolates out to the other go-to-market motions as well, where then you can really lean into which one makes the most sense.
Yeah.
I think that you brought up a really interesting notion on the difference between content versus community. And I think there's a few companies and organizations that take both into consideration, but understand the distinction. One example would be Supered, which, as any user of the platform or anyone who's seen their content will know, they are huge on content. And even though they don't have, say, a community page such as like a Supered Slack channel or a Supered Facebook page that community members go to, what they do have is community through promoters, where a lot of people will promote the app and the service just through social media and through talking about it. And so the two can intertwine, but if we look at Sprocketeer, for example, you have a lot of community members. It's a big community. And then you have members like myself and other Sprocketeers who create content, but that is different in that it really is community led. And so I think that they can intertwine. They can also be somewhat exclusive of one another. But as you highlighted, it's a spectrum. And I think a successful business or organization is going to have a little bit of all of this happening at any given time.
Absolutely. They just all help each other. And and Sprockets here, I think, is a great example of community led. So I appreciate bringing it back to making it meta. This whole concept is pretty meta. I'm talking about like what being a content creator is. I'm talking about myself under this framework. So I appreciate the reminder on it. I did want to ask a question to the group here. Now I brought up the spectrum, do you agree with this order of how this works? And would you change community and content as the one? Is that more product focused or more content or more people focused? And if you have no opinions, cool. I'll move on to the next section, but I just want to maybe create a dialogue around that.
Yeah, and I'd be curious for anyone listening to chime in the comments and add their thoughts too. But I definitely think that community is people driven in a different way. And so I don't know that one is more people focused than the other. But I think that when it comes to community, for
Is it like
example,
just
it
put them on
it
top of each other?
relies well, in a way, right? Because in a way, if you have content and nobody looks at it, then what's the purpose, right? What's it going to do? But
Absolutely.
similarly, by definition and by nature, community requires the usage of having other people in the community, right? So I think both, I would say, in a way, are equally people focused. The difference being, depending on the type of content and the call to action, or the type of community and how you leverage it, depending on the situation, that is to say, one can be more product focused than the other. And that would be dependent on, are you using one or the other more heavily to drive the product and drive the revenue? Right. So if you create content and it really doesn't talk about the product and it really doesn't talk about a call to action, maybe it's good content, maybe it's not, but then maybe that's more community or person focused. Whereas community that's leveraging the notion of a call to action and leveraging the notion of using the community to generate sales, that's probably more product focused. So I think it's
Mm.
how you use the asset, which can be interchangeable, that would dictate where it fits on the spectrum.
I like the flexibility of that. I have a tendency to say this is the way. So I really appreciate that call out of this. Depending on your specific business, you can flip these over or they stack on top for it, which is how your people interact with it is really essential. And it shows the unique nature of what the product and services and community create. Is it's just a byproduct of all the different people involved and what type of culture that creates. And so, Mark, thank you for coming back. I was curious if you had an opinion around this product focused spectrum versus people focused spectrum. If not, I'll just move on to the next section and where community and content kind of fall within it. I have them here. Do you think they should be like on top of each other, switched?
Can you hear
I
me?
think
Can
his
you hear me?
audio is
Now we can.
Okay. Okay, yeah, we have a storm coming in, so like my power has flickered on and
Oh,
off twice now.
hopefully you stay safe.
So hopefully we don't lose power. Yeah, so the difference, this spectrum here is, it's interesting because I think that there was a period of time that probably aligned with kind of the height of kind of the COVID bump, as it were. Free money and SaaS companies in particular were doing really well, where product-led growth was seen as this kind of magical thing that if you're able, anybody can implement it, and all you needed to do is implement it, and you'd have kind of the scalable growth where you didn't have to hire as many people in order to support your growth. And I think a lot of companies were pitched this by their investors and made huge changes, fired their sales reps, and then the market completely changed. And you saw a lot of product led companies didn't do so well once interest rates changed. Those kind of net revenue retention numbers that they had, which were monstrous, really shrunk down because it doesn't work for everyone. I think that sales is always going to be needed. And especially when it comes to an enterprise company, it sometimes product led is not really possible because they don't have a free product, they don't have a freemium model, they don't have a trial. Everything has to go through a sales reps. So I think that product led is good, and there's aspects of it that can be used. For example, expanding existing accounts, you can build in those kind of growth loops that we've learned from the B2C world that kind of increases across the organization. But I think that community in particular is a growth emotion that is increasingly more important. And there's going to be more and more competition in that space.
It's hard to build a community. So yes, there'll be competition, but it's a very tall order to get, because we already have our established communities. Without a business wanting to build their own community, you have your community with your friends.
Yeah.
And that is, you're competing with that at the end of the day, which is a real hard one. There are around, I did want to make one call out around PLG and enterprise. Is PLG, I think, can actually work really well for enterprise, because enterprise stereotypically will have very long sales cycles. And I saw some really cool ones around. I forgot which exact company it was. Let's say it's Miro. I think Miro could be a great example. Well, the tool I'm using right here is
Yeah.
they find one person who's working at Amazon who loves Miro. That person is obsessed with it and goes and sells within Amazon. And then, or there's different design teams all using Miro, and then they brought it together saying, oh, there's 3 different Amazon people from 3 different teams. We have a opportunity to reach out to them and then get connected in. So I think that's a great example of using product-led growth to go into the enterprise companies. But agreed, product-led growth doesn't work for all products. But I think thinking through how you can use your product in some way to get growth, I think, is essential, because at the end of the day, people are paying money for that, and not your sales team.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move on from this. We talked about go-to-market motions, and the last one here is growth model, and I have a little separate area for this. And so I'm actually going to do a change live because I was in this pre-MVP stage. Actually, I'll show what it is first, and I'll talk about it. So I got this one as well from our RevOps summer school. This is a great content. We can't highly recommend it enough, especially this one episode I've showed is just one of them, and there's 6 different parts. So we talk about how the trajectory of growing a business. And this is really cool. And I did basically the same thing, but I've simplified it. Is they talk about how this can be different each of your different go-to-market motions, because it relates back to the one stage versus named accounts, can each have their own pattern here. I think that's cool, but a little complicated. And I drilled in more into the pre-revenue side, because I think it's very easy for us, especially in the RevOps world, to talk about, oh, let's make a lot more money. But as a founder, there's so much that happens before you actually make any money. So I view it, the first stage is product market fit research. And I'll relate this back to my dance fitness business. This was me going to concerts and just like absorbing and seeing what the landscape is of people dancing at shows, and me feeling different problems that I felt within that world. Then I made a prototype of, okay, I see what's happening. Maybe I can create a dance fitness class that solves these problems that I'm experiencing. And then I made an MVP of, okay, that's how I can actually this is an actual product that people can do. I haven't made any money at this stage yet. There is a big jump, but from MVP to actually testing your product market fit. But within product market fit, I think of them as three different stages. Is you have your founder-led growth, you have your founder who loves this, they're passionate about the product, they want to see the reality. They're really going to be the ones who push it, in my opinion. And then you get into PLG. All right, now that you've pushed it as the founder, can that product actually sustain it at some level? There needs to be can the product do it without the sales team? And that's where RevOps really starts to shine, is because you're testing that product market fit in the PLG led. So then RevOps really starts to shine more as you go this way. But hybrid led is you don't really know anymore. You had to do both of these to then figure out product market fit to a certain point. And so what is that point? We were talking, I think it was you, Cameron, or no, it was Mark. I forgot. It was one of you two who brought up, when do you know you actually have product market fit? And under this example, it's a certain revenue level, but it's this continuous spectrum if you're always testing it. But at a certain revenue level, you're saying we're going to switch from product market fit testing to go to market fit testing, which is going through all of these different motions and being realistic of, how is sales led doing for us? Well, our conversion rates aren't great here. Maybe we should focus more on product led growth because our PQLs have a great conversion rate to paid customers. So that's where RevOps, like this is at RevPartners, this is where we shine. It's because we work with, okay, we have all these different go-to-market motions. How do we systematize this and make it where a lot of people think they're here when they're really here. And a lot of people are here when they want to be here. So you're dealing with a lot of struggles of, I'm ready to test my go-to-market fits. No, people aren't actually signing up for your product. You're not ready to invest more money into it. So at each of these stages, you can think of this as where A, Series B, different. I think this would be more of a Series B, and this would be either a Series A or an angel round. And leveraging, once you hit these points, then you need additional capital to really fully test it. So in a nutshell, from pre-revenue to revenue, and then there's these different milestones related to revenue of switching between these stages, from testing your product to testing your go-to-market to now you're really ready to scale.
I'm curious to hear from both of you because I have a strong opinion, which we touched on earlier, which is that it's so important to do rather than do a lot of research before you dive in. And so I know, Paul, you're building your primal prancing business. I've worked with people who are trying to start a business and they're in the product market fit research stage. And I see a lot of people who are sole proprietors, small business owners. And oftentimes they get stuck in this state of analysis paralysis where they're doing research and doing research. And it happens even to large companies where they want more data, they want more data, they want more data. So, what's your take on doing analysis, but also moving things forward to actually build and grow a legitimate and sustainable business?
It's a hard one, man, right? I think it's a lot easier just to absorb data than take action. And I think the reality is, how do you do it? You have to do both in parallel. You're testing, like doing the thing and then learning about it. So how do you actually prioritize it? It's a mindset that it's fun to build the thing and it's a fun to test it, and that the data collection only serves enough to get there. So the data collection is purely based around, how do I build the product, not how do I build the perfect product, but how do I get it to the next stage versus perfection, because perfection happens over time. Progress is perfection. There's no such thing. And I have one last bit there. If you are proud of your MVP, you launched too late, was a quote I heard, and I really love that one. I'm definitely anxious and nervous and realizing of different things I could have done better on my launch. I'm like, all right, good. Then you have room to improve. So launch earlier and then get obsessed with making it better.
We should all be grateful for the amount of updates that come out from HubSpot where maybe there are some efficiencies to be gained if they had waited to launch it. But to your point, I think it is better that you have access to a feature and maybe it will need some updates, but it's available, right? Like I think that getting anything out into the market is so valuable, especially because then you start getting feedback on what's working and what isn't. So to that point, If you love your MVP, you waited too long, you might as well launch it early, start getting feedback, and maybe you have customers who would have stayed around for 12 months, but they left at 3 because they didn't like something. Well, now you know what they didn't like, and you can use that to build a better product and get customers who will stay for 12, 24 plus months.
And the 3 things they just didn't even use. You make all these things, at least dude, the first software product I made was I just kept building and building, and then when I was shared it with people, they cared about, like, 5% of what I built. Alright, cool. So then you know what to focus on instead of building for what you think someone will wanna use.
Yeah. You got to launch and iterate. That's the best way. If you wait too long, then someone's going to swoop in. I find that if I wait too long, I fall out of love with the idea and then get a wandering eye and start thinking about something else. So you got to take action.
Yeah, when there's a
Yeah.
new shiny thing, it's hard not to do the new shiny thing.
Yeah.
And it's difficult for, I think, a lot of people to reconcile the notion of doing something early and taking on feedback that might be negative, given that you might get that negative feedback. And so there's an example of one of the members of the Sprocketeer community who had published a workflow, and it was, here's a how to on this workflow that solves a problem. And there were a whole bunch of comments on why that workflow was inefficient and why there was a better way to do it and why that workflow sucked. And it was really interesting because A, those people who were making those comments were not publishing content to be helpful. They were simply on there adding their comments. But more importantly, the person who had published the original post now had feedback and was able to make a follow up post saying, hey, a lot of you had strong opinions. Here was a better way to do this. Here's a revised version. But if they hadn't made the original post, if they hadn't published the original content, they wouldn't have had the feedback. They wouldn't have been able to share the revised version of this workflow. So there's so much value to publishing content early and often, making releases earlier than maybe you think you should, and getting that feedback from the market.
Oh, absolutely. I think it's really fun. And then you find what people like care. Who cares about it? Instead of you being lost in your own little bubble. You're like, oh wait, I'm not alone in this. That's nice. It's nice to know you're not alone when you're doing these
Definitely.
cool, hard things.
And Paul, I know we are moving toward wrapping. So before we go to the end of show notes, I want to give you a moment to plug Primal Prancing and tell everyone a little bit about your business.
Awesome. I appreciate it, Cameron. Kind of do a little show and tell on it too, because I think I built a website. I did not use HubSpot CMS on it.
We'll fix that.
I want to see if I can guess which CMS you use just by viewing it. So don't
Oh,
tell me.
I don't think it's hard to guess.
Which
Dan,
ones?
you were spot on. It's Wix. Wix a really clean, easy website to make. What I do like about HubSpot CMS, thank you to Cameron, is you can have a custom domain, get your .com brand name for free. They're the only web platform I've ever seen that does that. So what Primal Prancing is, why I'm doing it is, I guess I'll get to, is unlocking your latent desire. But I built a dance fitness format based around concert people. So it's dance like everyone's watching. I think there's a common trope of dance like no one's watching. So I really unleashing your primal energy. So I'm blending dance, fitness, and ecstatic dance. Why is to provide this framework to help you dance more. We do simple choreography. So we're mixing choreography with freedom, and then really focusing in on online. I'm based in Denver, Colorado. So if you want to go to a dance fitness class in person, it's very concert friendly, as we really focus in on that. And I put out content the way I do it is in a very similar format to this, where we record a long episode, a full class, and then that gets chopped and edited into smaller clips. But to go in person, it's currently invite only. And then you can just see me dancing like a fool on the internet. But yeah, it's meant to be a framework to help you dance more in your personal life and then also at concerts.
Love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. If you're interested in Prancing, definitely check it out. There will be a comment with the link in the show notes. Paul, thank you so much for joining us today. For those of you who don't know, we are members of the Sprocketeer community, which is the largest independent community for HubSpot super admin and HubSpot users. Again, if you're not a member of that community, check it out with the link in the show notes. We are in Slack, and you have almost 2,000 HubSpot users and just people who are helping one another solve HubSpot problems and providing solutions. Totally free. Definitely recommend joining. Also, make sure if you haven't been checking it out, You Must, the HubSpot admin user group hosted by Deanna Gloff, Kyle Jepson. That is hosted Tuesdays at 10 a.m. Central Time. Link is in the show notes. And finally, if you were a fan of this show, make sure you check out our previous episodes, which are on Spotify and YouTube. Paul, thank you for joining. Mark, always a pleasure when we get to do these. Everyone, sprocket on.
Have a great weekend, everyone.